Welcome to Coffee and Regs, a CSS RegTech podcast series on moving from a tactical to strategic approach to regulatory compliance.
Hi, this is Natalie Silverman for CSS. Welcome to our next episode of Coffee and Regs. On today's episode, we're making predictions for PRIIPs and how the regulatory landscape in 2022 with PRIIPs and SFDR is reminiscent of 2018 with the implementation of PRIIPs and MiFID II. Please welcome CSS's Chief Product Officer, Ronan Brennan. Good morning, Ronan, and thanks for sitting down for Coffee and Regs.
So, hello everyone. Thank you for joining me today as we look forward to 2022 and in particular looking at the regulatory horizon with respect to PRIIPs. We had some news with respect to the Parliament in Europe passing the deferral date. So the RTS that's been in circulation for quite a while now will not be effective until the 1st of January 2023. And in line with that, the UCITS grandfathering period will be extended to that point as well. And then we expect all of the contingent dates in the RTS to be adjusted to reflect for that. So that means that the grandfathering date and the RTS effective date will both move at the same time to the 1st of Jan 2023. While this gives the market an additional 6 months to prepare, the additional news this week was that it looks like SFDR will also be pushed out. So the level 2 RTS that was to have come into play on the 1st of July looks now, based on the letter as published from John Berrigan this week, is likely to be extended also to the same date, so to have the same effective date as PRIIPs. So that's going to give kind of coterm a lot of work that all needs to go live at the same point in time. It kind of reminds me of January 2018 when MiFID and PRIIPs went live together and it was a significant lift for the industry. So I'm expecting this, while people will probably welcome the deferral of both, at the same time the co-terming of both is probably something no one had wished for. So what do we do? Let's look at PRIIPs. What can firms do to prepare? I guess the key thing is that firms need to get a tight grip on the various changes that have happened. So we've already covered that in a number of blogs. So we've covered the core changes to the KID documents themselves. We've covered the changes to the cost calculations. There's a couple of kind of what I'll call narrative related changes. But the most significant changes, as we see it, are relate to the calculation of performance scenarios for Category 2 PRIIPs. And it's not so much that the calculation is going to be a challenge for firms, rather the data requirement is going to be the problem for firms, and indeed the collection and preparation of that data. And if folk recall, the pressure that came into play as people ran into 2018 was the preparation of the proxies and benchmarks required for funds that didn't have enough pricing history. So with the current version of PRIIPs, assuming a daily priced fund, that requirement was for a 2-year history. And so funds with the less than 2 years of history required a lot of preparation work, a benchmark or alternative proxy time series to be identified, and then any blending had to be conducted to connect the old history to the new history in a sane way. This time round, that time period has extended. So with the latest RTS, as drafted currently, that minimum time period extends to approximately 10 years, given a recommended holding period of 5 years. So the minimum period will be 5 years plus the recommended holding period. With the funds, certainly that our clients are mostly engaged with, most of those funds fall into the 5-year recommended holding period. So the typical requirement will be a minimum of 10 years of data. Now that increases the number of funds that will be missing or not have the available data set by quite a number. And it is already, anyone that's already started this work, and we have a number of clients that have already started the work of identifying this, have found that there is a very material change in the number of funds being included. And so there is a significantly higher lift required to prepare this data set. That's not something to be overlooked or to underestimate. So that's, I think, the key thing for firms to check out first. The transaction cost calculations, the changes to them are not massively difficult to deal with. In fact, in many cases, they're welcomed. Most of the TCA vendors will already be able to adjust to the waterfall as indicated in the latest RTS. So we don't see any issues on that side. And in general, the other changes are all broadly welcomed and don't present kind of large upheaval challenges. Thinking through, though, in terms of implementation, another thing people need to be mindful of was back in 2018, while the PRIIPs Kid went live for, say, in most cases, insurance products on the 1st of January 18. The EPT was being produced and exchanged many months beforehand. And so most folk will have recognised that the Findatex, the European Working Group, have released for public consultation the latest EPT 2.0. This template, once finalised by Findatex, firms will be expected to produce and start exchanging that, I would estimate, by the 1st of October next year. So that, in fact, is the end date. That is the production date, in fact, for most investment managers. They will need to be thinking about having RTS2 compliant data in the market in the EPT2 template, ready to exchange on the 1st of October. That will be the date that their partners in the industry will expect them to have that data ready by. And so that kind of cuts by a quarter that runway that firms believe they have. And so that's another key thing that we would urge firms not to overlook, is the requirement for EPT will predate the effective date of the RTS by at least 3 months. We would expect firms also to be requesting copies of EPT earlier than that, so that they can do end-to-end UAT. We're certainly working with our clients to help them prepare well in advance of the summer for many of these template requirements, including the EET as it will come into effect for SFDR. So that's our update today. I hope everyone is carefully working through the different dependencies that the RTSs create and take advantage of the fact that we've already gone through PRIIPs 1. There was a lot of lessons learned, and please don't forget the lessons. I know they were a number of years ago, but let's be mindful of the mistakes that folks made in the past, and let's not make the same mistakes again.
Thanks, Ronan, for the insight into how you like your regs in the morning. For CSS, this is Natalie Silverman.
This has been another episode of Coffee and Regs, a CSS RegTech podcast series. Make sure you catch every episode by subscribing to our podcast on www.cssregtech.com or through your podcast platform of choice. Thanks so much for tuning in. This podcast is brought to you by Compliance Solutions Strategies and is for general information purposes only. All rights reserved.